1. Arrival. A dacha like no other. I rented a dacha in a village where no one ever dies. Yes, I know how that sounds. Like the setup to a low-budget horror film where the first 10 minutes are just someone yelling, "What could possibly go wrong?" before being eaten by something vaguely Slavic with too many teeth. But I wasn't looking for excitement. I was looking for peace. And this place, according to a red-faced man I met at a train station bar, was the most peaceful on earth. "No one ever dies there," he said, stirring his vodka with a matchstick. "Air like gold. People like statues. You'll sleep like the dead." The dacha was cheap, suspiciously cheap. That should have been clue number 1. But I was tired, recently divorced, and had a bottle of whiskey with my name on it, so I took the deal. 1 train ride, 1 bus, a terrifying trip in a Soviet-era van held together by duct tape and the will of a drunken driver named Boris. And I was there. The village was tidy. That's the only word for it. Tidy in a way that felt like someone was constantly sweeping behind you. The dacha itself looked like it had been curated by a serial killer with a thing for crochet. Doilies on everything. Even the axe outside had a little knitted hat. I was greeted by a woman named Galina, who smelled like formaldehyde and cherry jam. She handed me a pie. "You'll need strength. The forest watches," and shuffled away without another word. The first night was uneventful, except for the silence. Real silence. No insects, no cars, not even wind. Just my own breathing, and the faint ticking of a grandfather clock that I don't remember being in the listing photos. The villagers were friendly in the way mannequins are friendly. They smiled. They waved. They all said the same thing every morning. "Good morning. The sky is kind today." Even when it rained. Even when I saw lightning strike a tree just outside the village and no one batted an eye. My neighbors never seemed to age. I mean it. I found a photo in the attic of the house next door, taken during some harvest festival in the 1980s. The people in the photo were the same as the ones now. Same clothes, same faces, same unsettlingly perfect teeth. I asked Galina about it. She stared at me and said, "You must be mistaken. Photographs lie." Sometimes at night I'd swear the trees were closer than they'd been in the afternoon. The shadows in the hallway liked to rearrange themselves, and the stove, which I never touched, was always warm. Still, I stayed. Because in a weird way, it was comforting. The dacha felt like it remembered me. Like it had been waiting. And besides, no one ever dies here. Isn't that what we all want? 2. Routines and repetitions. They say that routine is good for the soul. "Structure keeps the madness out," my therapist once said, while furiously scribbling something that I'm fairly sure was a grocery list. But in this village, routine wasn't a healthy suggestion. It was a rule, a mandate, a law written somewhere in blood and embroidered on a throw pillow. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., the rooster crowed. The same rooster. I named him Yuri. Yuri had 1 eye and a mean limp and the shrillest crow this side of hell. But he was punctual, I'll give him that. At 7:05, the church bell rang. Always once. Just once. Even though, as far as I could tell, the church had been boarded up since Brezhnev. At 7:10, the villagers would appear, emerging from their homes like perfectly programmed NPCs. Smiles plastered, eyes just slightly too wide, they'd walk by my gate and chant their line, "Good morning. The sky is kind today." No one ever looked surprised, or tired, or annoyed, just polite, in that Stepford Wives but Russian way. I started watching closely. Every morning, the same woman dropped a loaf of bread. Every morning, The same man helped her pick it up. Every morning they laughed with the same synchronized awkwardness. I'm talking exact repetition. I checked video footage on my phone. Frame for frame, it matched. I thought maybe I was losing it. Or maybe the villagers had hired a very specific theater troupe. I tried breaking the pattern. One morning I stepped outside naked, waving a ladle and shouting about Nietzsche. No one blinked. A man nodded and said, "Yes, the sky is kind today," as if I wasn't threatening the sun with a soup utensil. I asked Galina if they always followed the same schedule. She didn't answer, just stirred her tea counterclockwise for a full 5 minutes while staring at a wall. When she finally spoke, it was just to say, "Tea is best when it knows you're patient." Shopping was no better. The store stocked only what you needed, not what you wanted. What you needed. I once wrote "pickles" on a piece of paper and left it on the counter. The next day, a jar appeared on the shelf with my name scratched into the label. I'm not saying it was blood. I'm also not saying it wasn't. The worst was the mail. I never gave anyone my address, yet every Thursday a letter arrived. No return address, just a page of text that seemed familiar. Until I realized I was receiving transcripts of conversations I hadn't had yet. That was the moment I stopped checking the mailbox. After a week, I knew what would happen every hour of the day. When the wind would blow, when the birds would land, when the shadow would move in the mirror. I started feeling less like a person and more like a badly written character in a looping script. And then, one morning, the rooster didn't crow. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was expectant. Something had noticed I was watching. 3. The first cracks. The day the rooster fell silent, everything shifted. Not in a dramatic apocalypse is here sort of way. It was more like a perfectly set stage play where someone forgot a line. A single thread pulled from a tapestry. Minor, but enough to ruin everything. At 7:05, the church bell rang, but this time it rang twice. The villagers still emerged at 7:10, still smiled, still muttered, "Good morning. The sky is kind today." But the rhythm was off. One man stumbled slightly. Another woman's smile came a second too late. Galina waved from her window, but her hand twitched, like her puppet string had gotten tangled. I walked to the well and found the same woman who always dropped her loaf of bread standing there, frozen, clutching the loaf like it was a grenade. When I said hello, she blinked. Once, twice, then backed away, dropped the bread, and ran. That was new. Back at the Dacha, I found something else. My front door was ajar. I always locked it. Always. But it wasn't broken. It looked opened. Lovingly. The way your grandmother might open a door to leave you tea and a knitted scarf. Inside, everything was as I left it. Except for one thing. A note on the kitchen table. In my handwriting. Don't drink the water. Not after this. I don't remember writing it. The sink dripped once. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I wasn't tired, I was exhausted, but because the house breathed. I'm not being poetic. The walls expanded and contracted. Floorboards creaked in sync. The grandfather clock ticked backward, forward, then stopped. At 2:13 a.m., I heard something shuffle outside. I peeked through the curtain. A figure stood at the gate. Not moving. Just there. Watching. A silhouette against the night. Too tall and too still. I blinked. It was gone. In the morning, I went to the store. It was closed. For the first time. A handwritten sign said, "Inventory. Check back yesterday." The church door, boarded up for decades, was open. Inside, everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Except for one pew. and a cup of still warm tea. Galena wasn't home. The other villagers stopped waving. They walked past me like I wasn't there. That night, I found another note. This time it was carved into the wood beneath my bed. "You're remembering too much." The rooster never crowed again. 4. The truth beneath it started with the cellar. You see, my dacha had a locked door in the floor. I'd noticed it on my first day and, like any sensible horror protagonist, ignored it completely. Because who opens ominous doors in strange villages where no one dies? Exactly. Suicidal morons and people in insurance commercials. But after the rooster vanished, the breadwoman ran, and the mirror in the hallway began showing reflections that weren't mine. I figured, what the hell? Worst case scenario, I get dragged to hell by beetroot demons. Best case, maybe there's vodka. I found the key in the least imaginative place possible, under the flower pot labeled "Do not look here." I opened the hatch. The air that spilled out wasn't musty. It was sterile. Like a hospital and a mortuary had a baby and raised it in a vacuum. I descended, flashlight in hand, heart pretending to be a heavy metal drummer. The cellar wasn't a cellar. It was a room. A pristine, metal-lined room with flickering fluorescent lights and file cabinets. Government issue, Soviet style, the good old KGB aesthetic. All it needed was a portrait of Stalin and a radio playing Swan Lake. In one of the drawers, photos. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Faces, the villagers, me, kids, adults. Same faces over and over again with different timestamps. 1962, 1979, 2004. Always the same smile, always the same blank eyes. There were records, too, typewritten pages labeled Reintegration Protocol and Neural Inertia Study. I skimmed a few. From what I could gather, and I'm no scientist, I barely passed high school chemistry. This village was an experiment, a behavioral loop. A closed system designed to study immortality, memory degradation, and emotional inertia? Basically, someone figured out how to make people live forever. But the catch? You had to forget. You couldn't change. Memory, it seemed, was the true killer. That's why no one aged. That's why they repeated everything. It wasn't charm. It was containment. If someone started to remember too much, the system corrected it, reset them, or removed them. That's what happened to Galena. I found her file, dated back to 1955. The last entry, subject displays non-compliant empathy, risk of awakening others, recommend removal. Next to it, a sticky note, replacement prepped. Subject number 7622 en route. There was a Polaroid. It was me. I left the cellar with the subtle grace of a drunk moose and locked the hatch behind me. I tried to act normal, watered a plant, read the same page of a book 17 times. The villagers had stopped even looking at me. That night, the figure returned. At the gate. Same posture. This time, it waved. In the morning, I found a thermos on my doorstep. It was warm. My name was etched into the side. Inside, instead of coffee, ash. Underneath it, a note. Drink. Forget. Or leave. I stared at the thermos. For once, the sky didn't seem kind at all. 5. Exit, or something like it. I didn't drink the ash. I considered it. Came close. Stared into that thermos like it was a magic 8-ball that might whisper me a way out. But in the end, I did the one thing the villagers never did. I hesitated. And that, it turns out, was enough. The village noticed. That day the bread woman didn't come to the well. The man who always helped her never left his house. The streets were empty, the sky dimmer, like someone had turned down the contrast on reality. The silence was no longer passive. It pressed in around me, suffocating. Even Yuri, the rooster's ghost, wouldn't have stuck around. I tried walking to the forest. The path that had always been there now looped back to the dacha. I walked for hours. Every tree I passed whispered. I didn't hear words, just breath. Ragged, desperate breath. The kind you hear when someone realizes they've been buried alive. By evening, the villagers returned. But now, they didn't speak. They just watched. From windows. From porches. One leaned on a rake for 3 hours without blinking. I waved. He didn't move. I flipped him off. Nothing. Real neighborhood watch energy. Except the neighbors were maybe dead, and the only thing they were watching was my slow unraveling. That night, I barricaded myself in the dacha. Furniture against windows, chairs under doorknobs. I even sprinkled salt at the threshold, not because I believed in that kind of thing, but because desperation makes pagans of us all. At 3:33 a.m., the door knocked. Once, twice. Then it opened without touching. The villagers stood there, smiling. All of them. Every single one. Even Galina. Her head was tilted like someone had reattached it with too much enthusiasm. She was holding a pie. "Time to choose," she said. Her voice was 2 octaves too low and sounded like it came from inside my bones. "Forget," said the man with the rake. "Or leave," said Yuri the rooster. Yes, Yuri was there. And yes, he spoke. "No, I don't want to talk about it." I didn't answer. I just ran. The forest swallowed me. Paths bent. Trees leaned. I tripped more than once. At one point, I swear the moon blinked. But eventually, I stumbled out onto a road. And there was Boris, in his death trap van, smoking a cigarette like I hadn't been gone for weeks, months, years. "You look like hell," he said. "I feel like disco," I replied, because my brain had given up trying to form rational sentences. He drove me back to the city. Never asked a question. Just hummed to himself and occasionally slapped the dashboard like it owed him money. At home, I unpacked. The thermos was still in my bag. I didn't put it there. I poured it out. Ash again. But this time, at the bottom, a single note, burned at the edges. "You left." But did you really? Now, every morning, I wake at 7 o'clock. And sometimes, when I pass a mirror, the reflection blinks out of sync. The sky hasn't seemed kind in a long, long time.